Welcome to Photoshop for photographers, and today we're going to tackle blending modes inside of Photoshop, and more specifically, just the darken and lighten blending modes. Now, I'm going to show you a chart and sort of explain what blending modes do, but we're going to focus on just the lighten and darken today, because truthfully, understanding what each blending mode does is really important. It would be too difficult, I think, for most people who don't know what blending modes do to understand the full set all in one video. So we're going to take this slow, and in a couple of videos, I'm going to introduce new blending modes, and I'm going to explain, what blending modes are ones that you typically are going to use. And there's truthfully a lot of blending modes that I've never actually used. And so I'm going to show you what they do and then how often and how important they are when blending images inside of Photoshop. Now, one of the things that I have issue with is people are like, oh, you can take any two images and blend them together inside of Photoshop. Well, in essence, that is true. But if you understand how blending modes work, it can make blending actually really easy. There are two ways to attack blending. One is to make life really difficult and it take a long time to do. And the other is if you shoot it correctly or bring in or use the right images, you can make blending really, really easy. Now, would you rather do something that's really hard or really easy but get the same effect? I would prefer the easy way. What we're going to do here is we're going to switch on over to a little chart. This little chart is just going to make it easy for you to understand what the different groups of blending do. So you'll notice in the center here, we have the different blending modes, and those are normal, dissolve, darken, multiply, color burn, linear blur, and so on, all the way down through luminosity. Those are all the different blending modes that we have. Now, I've grouped each one of those blending modes into a category, which is on your left. So the first set of blending modes are normal, meaning they don't really do anything as far as blending. The only way you blend is by lowering your opacity. The second set is darken. So all of these blending modes are darkening your image. The second set is lightened. Then the next set is contrast, meaning that it's affecting the contrast. Then inversion, and usually this is inverting your color. And the last are more color specific, meaning they're affecting the color in some way. To the right of this, I've written some information to kind of further clarify what they're doing. Now, what you have to understand is each one of these blending modes, though, like darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, and darker color, are darkening your image, they all do it in a little bit different way. And what I have written to the right is sort of a general term, and it will get more specific when we go into each specific blending mode. Under darken, that means it makes the blend color darker. So what is the blend color? Basically, we're going to have a base color, and that's your bottom image. And then you're going to put a secondary image on top. That one on top is the one that is going to get blended. We have the base layer, we have the top layer, and then your blend layer is what happens when you use a blending mode on those two layers. And that result is your blend layer. This means it makes your blend layer darker and it hides white. So if you have an image and you want to just add the dark elements, darkening blend modes are going to work really good because they're going to just drop your whites and use your blacks. Now you have the complete opposite for lighten. That's going to make your blend layer lighter and it's going to hide your black. The contrast blend modes, pixels darker than 50% are going to be darkened, pixels lighter than 50% gray are going to be lightened, and it hides 50% gray. So if you have 50% gray, you won't see any change. Inversion, blend is caused by the variation between layers and it inverts your color. Now these are kind of these wacky looking effects, and most likely you will not be using them unless you're trying to do something a little bit different. Then you have the color layers, which are wonderful blend modes. And the blend is determined by the component selected, meaning if you select saturation, your blend is going to be affecting the saturation. If you pick luminosity, your luminosity is going to be affected in the blend. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to some images and kind of see what this type of information means. So right here we have this picture of this guy on a dock sitting in front of on this lake, and this is our base layer. And then I have this new image in which this is 100% white. This is white. This is black. This is a gradient from white to black. This is 50% gray, and then we have some red, some green, and some blue. Now this is going to help kind of show you what the blend modes are going to be doing. I have to say this can be a little bit difficult for people to look at, but we're going to kind of get an idea of how blend modes work. So if I come to this normal blend mode, we can see it's not doing anything. The only way I could blend is to reduce the opacity of the two layers. And so we're seeing the two layers, and that is the blend. Now, dissolve does the same thing, but it does this kind of weird Gaussian dissolve effect. I've never ever seen anybody actually use that. Now, the next thing that we have is the darken set. So we have darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, and darker color. The two that we're going to focus on are darker and multiply. Under darker, notice the white has been totally dropped. The black has been kept, so it's 100% black. We have no effect or change right here because we have dropped the white on the top layer. The gradient is affecting the image dependent on whether the top color is darker than the bottom color. So what's that mean? So in this case, if the bottom color is lighter than the top color is going to replace it. So right here, we're losing detail because this top color is darker and it's replacing all the pixels in that area. Here, it's replacing some of the pixels, but not all of the pixels. Remember, the pixel on top has to be darker. So if this pixel here in this little shadow is darker, the top layer isn't going to replace it. But where it's white, most likely this gray is going to be darker, so it's replacing that area. Then here in the red, green, and the blue, it's replacing it and making that area darker, but with that color. Then we have multiply. Multiply works similarly, but differently. So white is totally dropped, black is kept. However, in this case, what happens is if the top color is darker, meaning if this top color is darker, it's darkening the pixel below it. Before, it replaced it, and that's why we lost this value. In this case, if the top pixel is darker, it's darkening the underlying pixel. Where before, under darken, it replaced it. Here, it's just darkening it. So that's the big difference between multiply and darken. Most of the time I use multiply, not darken, but that's the difference between multiply and darken. Then we're going to come down here to lighten. So lighten is the complete opposite. So your blacks are going to be completely dropped. It's going to keep your white. In this case, any pixel that is lighter on the top, it's going to be replaced. So you're going to have this pixel is going to replace this pixel. So if the pixel on top is lighter, it's going to replace that pixel. And if the pixel on the bottom is lighter, it's going to keep that pixel. If you go to screen, just like multiply, we've lost the blacks, we've kept the white. But if the pixel on top is lighter, it's lightening the pixel below. It's not replacing it, it's lightening the pixel below. The big difference between screen and lighten is one, it's replacing the pixel, and the other, it's either lightening or darkening the pixel. So let's take a look here at sort of a real world example of how these blending modes could actually work. So in this case, we've got this image here of this person on the water and the sky, and I've overlaid it with a very contrasty image. Now, this top layer being contrasty is going to make the blending really easy. Why? Well, because we know Darken is going to pick the darker areas and Lighten is going to pick the lighten areas. If I come down here to Darken, you can see it's picking up some of those darker areas. A multiply, it's blending the two images really easily because most of the darker values in the tree are easily being picked up over the light areas. However, if we go down to Lighten, it's picking up a lot of the lighter areas. Now, since there's a lot of white in this image, we're getting sort of this washed out effect. And in this case, remember, blending is easy to do, but sometimes it doesn't work. It's knowing what two images you're blending together. So in this case, though we're blending two images, it's not really doing much or looking that good because they just don't work together well. So once again, we'll come over to this image. And in this image, I've got this picture of this lady, and on the top, we've got a picture of the tree. Well, we don't really want to blend the picture of the sky. We just want this dark, contrasty tree, and we're going to overlay it on her face. So we know that this multiply or darken are going to work really well. It's just completely dropping that sky, and we're automatically blending this over top of her face. I can come in here and do sort of a little free transform, and I can enlarge this and make it a little bit bigger if I want. And now we have this image of this tree that we can place anywhere. So I could come down here and put it outside of her face a little bit, so it looks like it's just on her skin. We can come in and put a mask. And remember, if we have black on the mask, that's going to hide or remove that area. We're just going to, and we're not going to do the world's greatest job of this. We're just going to come in here and sort of hide that from the shirt. In this way, we're just putting this overlay, and I can even drop the opacity a little bit if I want. So it's overlaying onto her face or her skin to blend these two images together. So this blending was really easy because it has a strong contrast. I just wanted the black areas. Her face was white. So since that is the contrast or the opposite, it makes it really easy to either drop black or white by picking blending modes, whether you want to darken or lighten that image. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding of the darken and lighten blending modes inside Photoshop. Next time we'll take a look at some more of the different blending modes and how those work. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.